This first section of my book chronicles the 3-week experience of having my desert inspiration follow me home to the city. I had no idea how long this muse would stay, though I'm glad I could record a little of what it had to say. This experience began on March 4th, 2017, and was complete on March 23rd. I've enjoyed a long relationship with my muse, which tends to arrive suddenly, urgently demanding I record my thoughts before she withdraws and leaves me with nothing more of substance to think or say. I first met my muse in my early 20s, while living alone for several years on an empty stretch of beach in Northern California. The muse would meet me sometimes at night while I walked alone along Moonstone Beach just south of Trinidad, watching the sea glide up and back across the gentle shore slope, expiring in shallow, sweeping wet sheets, the last energies of powerful waves crashing loudly in the distant dark. To stop for a second, this was a period of my life in college, basically just the period you just practically just finished, although I was younger than you, a little younger than you at the time, when I was living in a Frito-Lay potato chip delivery truck on a beach in Northern California, a 20-mile stretch of beach. I was the caretaker of the beach. Literally had that beach to myself. Sometimes at high tide the water would come under the truck. I'd have to start up the engine and move it up the hill. It was quite an experience. I lived there for almost 5 years, and I would walk at night, and it was to about 12 miles from Arcata, California, where the university was. And I would get up in my beat up old Camaro, and every day I'd drive up the dirt road and down to the city, go to school, and then come back. But in the evening, in the night, I had the place to myself, and during the day mostly I had the place to myself. And I had a 20-mile stretch of beach all alone, and I would walk in the night through every season. And this is a great, you know how those Northern California shorelines are, there's great crashing waves and long, you know, the waves would just go and marching far out to sea. They were crashing so far out, giant waves. And when they finally reached the shore, they would have this last vestige of energy this very gradual sand slope, and the waves would go like great big sheets across the water, moving across, and I'd walk barefoot across the sand at night. And when the moon was out and there was no fog, I could see the light of the moon reflecting on the ground, on the water, on the sheets of water, and I considered it my companion. I called it a moondog, and wherever I went, I could see that shimmering moon with me everywhere I went, through her every phase as the moon waxed from full to new, and that was my companion on the beach. So that's what I was referring to there. The muse has since been with me always, through every decade of my life, speaking via the mediums of poetry, prose, art, and video. She visits at her leisure and pleasure, though I found that activities like walking alone, listening to music, and the moderate application of alcohol have a way of luring her out, though she never stays for long, and if I fail to listen or write down what she has to say when she's saying it, then her message will surely be lost. My muse will never speak to me in the presence of others, though sometimes I detect her voice when I read good books or hear interesting people talk. So my muse has been with me ever since I was a young teenager, and I would get this little inspiration to write or make a poem or do a little drawing, and I think we all have that in a way. But what I discovered was, if I don't write it down at the moment, it's gone. Whatever she's speaking in my ears at that moment, I have to record in some way or it's gone. And what's more, what the muse said to me in my 20s, she won't say to me now in my 50s, nor my 30s, my 40s, and from this point forward. So the muse talks to me in different ways at every decade of my life. More evidence that it's just me talking to myself.
It's reflective of your state and your position in
Exactly,
life.
exactly. And that's why she'll never talk to me again that way, in that tone, because
Yeah.
I can never get back to that.
Yeah, well, you grow, you evolve.
That's right.
So does she.
That's right, yeah. I've never fooled myself into thinking that my muse is anything more than my own creativity. I know there is no supernatural entity visiting me with inspiration, and I'm aware that this creativity is subject to my own circumstance and well-being, and that my muse will die with me, or perhaps one day fade, falter, and grow silent when my mental energies which now produce her begin to fail. This process has already begun. Or my will and interest shift to elsewhere or nowhere at all. Thus the urgency to write when the muse speaks. Thus my desire to share before both she and I grow silent and are gone. So that's why I write and I compile and I share. Because it's my who was the author that said, my barbaric yelp?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I shout my barbaric yelp into the air. You know,
It sounds so familiar. I can't place it.
yeah, it's a wonderful line. Like, I'm not quoting it very well, but it's each of us for greater or lesser greater or lesser degree and to greater or lesser effect have a chance to yelp something into the world before we pass to sand. The following words are the product of my muse, spoken to me at odd times, requiring I step aside from work to write down what I hear, or pull my motorcycle to the side of the road to do the same. They tell a story in a way, in bits and pieces, ideas strung together over time, revealing a train of thought, buoyant of life, cognizant of death, and catalyzed of action. I am my muse's shadow author, though she and I both know she never really exists. So that's more talking to the characteristics of my muse. It's again, my characteristics. I've always been an internal optimist. The right word is buoyant. You know, it's just bubbling with energy, and it's not always good. I mean, sometimes that energy masks, you know, fears and trepidation and even depression at times in my life under the surface, and that's kind of the more dangerous element when that happens, because as a young man, I was the type of person that would be, in a way, it would have been hard to know that I was having a hard time because I did such a good job of masking it at the surface. That's that little thing there. So that's the prose part. I've introduced the muse. I've introduced who she is, that she's just me. Fancy that I call her a she.
Well, I think that's historical. I think
Yeah.
that's just the way it goes.
You're right.